Good morning. You're welcome to Searching the Heart this morning. I'll be doing another topic this weekend on the enticements of political power. The enticements of political power. Now, I thought I should talk about this because of some of the issues that have come up. And majorly, some of these topics come up because of realities on ground that we see. It's not because, we just, there's nothing to do, so we just talk about them. Because of the things that are actually happening. And, there is a trend in our society today where things are happening, but, we're told to be quiet, to pretend that nothing is happening because of the very problem that exists. It's like, you have, there's a saying that says the kettle is calling the pot, or the pot is calling the kettle black. And what is the reason behind that? Because, of course, the pot does not know it is black. And this is the issue that we face in our society, especially in the 21st century, where there's a lot of development and a lot of resources going around. You discover that amidst the multiplicity of the sharing of resources, it's very easy to leave a lot of people behind. And there is that technique, I'll call it a technique, used by people of power to, because they can get away with it. Of course, they tell people to be quiet, because at the end, when you are curling the herd, of course, it's a bloody process. And, nobody really cares as long as your aims are being achieved. So it's important to talk about these things, and I believe that this is what democracy over and the past 4 or 5 decades has been able to establish in the modern world. Slowly doing away with the ancient political systems that emphasize slavery and the suppression of the weak. And bringing more participation in the process of leadership, and of course more opportunities for people to live stably, doing away with poverty, doing away with marginalization, and bringing in a lot of inclusion in the process. And of course, that has brought about a lot of prosperity. But you see, everything must be managed. I think I would just, everything has to be managed. If you don't manage whatever good that is brought into the world, if you don't manage it, of course, you end up losing it, because there's that need in everything in this world for continuous management. Whether it's a machine, whether it's a system, you must manage it. If you don't maintain it, it will depreciate. And if it depreciates, it might end up collapsing. And that's the reason we keep on talking about these things. And today I'll be talking about the enticements of political power. Yes, the enticements of political power. Throughout human history, we have seen that political developments show that indeed power is a delicate issue among human beings. Nobody invented political power. Nobody invented the concept of leadership. Leadership naturally evolved because of need, and I think this is the problem that it is facing, because it naturally evolved. God allowed it to naturally evolve. Of course, when you go out of faith and religion, the allusion to God is not there. Of course, so they say leadership evolved. But in faith, we know that God is the one who established leadership. So already I'm pointing to an issue. But even as people of faith, we must accept that God has given us freedom because we are created in God's image. This is a dialogue between even people of faith and people outside faith. Okay, this is a dialogue within faith itself. And some faiths believe that we are slaves of God, while others believe that we have some certain level of freedom. Okay, like Christianity, without a little freedom, there is no use for Christianity at all. Christianity is based on that fact of choice. Okay, and so these are the issues that come up. Of course, we know that there are people even in atheism that don't believe in free will. Well, of course. So within all the ideologies and philosophies of this world, there are these two sides: those who believe that we are slaves, and those who believe that we are free to some certain extent. Okay. Now, looking at humanity from the eyes of the 21st century, it is difficult to reach the conclusion that human beings actually find it difficult to enact any form of government. And this is very true. Okay? In the 21st century, of course, we are used to governments. Of course, we know that there are nations in the world, so many nations, and all of them have governments. Of course, it is very strange to find people that don't have any government. But human history has not exactly been like that. Okay? Early human beings lived in small groups, and this was very liberal small groups. They were really very liberal, both from the evolutionary perspective and from the creation perspective. They were very liberal groups, small groups that moved around very frequently. Okay? And this subsisted in human history. Okay? So actually, human beings find it very hard to create any government. And why is that? Because human beings are very independent beings. Okay? Human beings are very independent beings. In fact, life itself is formed in a context of independence. Okay? There is that form of commensalism, symbiosis, community, but these life forms actually tend to develop on their own and thrive on their own, while depending on the greater ecosystem for sustenance. Okay? So we understand that while government is a necessity, especially with population, it is often a luxury in circumstances where human beings and animals can live sustainably without molestation or without the need for community itself. Okay? They can live and they can forage and without any molestation. They would prefer to live without community, okay, outside a community. Okay, even when you observe animals, that is how they are. And human beings have been like that. And so when you actually want to judge human community based on their ability to create a leadership system or government, you might get it wrong, because in history there is very little human government. Of course, it was towards the Neolithic era that humans began to create governments. Okay, so this is the issue. So we must understand this. Over the millennia, humans have formed governments with great difficulty. When governments are formed, they tend to be tyrannical. Okay, they tend to be tyrannical governments because of that tendency of human beings to be independent. Okay, and this created slavery, and we know that slavery has lasted through the entire span of human history, and up to today you still hear of it, even while democracy has and free human rights and freedom of human species have dominated the past more than 1 century or so. Slavery still subsists. So slavery is an issue that has always been present within human society. And this is what marks the enticements of political power. Okay? This is what marks the enticements of political power. Government has become very important, both for the fact that governments tended to create slavery, and it was through the instrumentality of government that slavery was destroyed. We find that governments have become very powerful. Okay? Human government have become very powerful. We'll still look a little into this after this short break.
Discover a transformative journey into the kingdom of heaven. Following the initial publication, the author dives deeper with two insightful follow-up books. Ever felt disconnected from God even in worship? Explore how God's unconventional ways can transform your life. How can you align with divine plans, avoiding distractions? Find answers in The Kingdom of Heaven on Earth and The 3, Illuminating Christian Truths and Prophetic Practices. Unlock profound insights guiding you toward a deeper connection with God. Don't miss out. Dive into this enlightening exploration today. Click the link on the caption to get your copy.
Now, we'll look a little into how this came to be. First of all, it is governments that began to bring people together, and mainly for the reason of security. Okay? When people banded together, they were able to chase away wild animals. They were able to build more stable structures, yes, by chasing away wild animals, which, of course, in the earlier history of the planet Earth, were more in abundance, especially those that were tended to be carnivorous and would find human beings as easy prey. So humans formed communities to protect themselves. And of course, they discovered that in forming these communities, they were able to thrive. Okay, they were able to build more stable structures. They were able to discover things that made their lives even more easier. Of course, there was power in numbers. And also, when they had threats from other human beings, they were able to repel such threats. And so this became an issue. Now, of course, that is where leadership developed from. Without leadership, it would be totally impossible to create such communities. Okay, so leadership developed or evolved from this, and because of this, these leaders became very powerful. Because, of course, the concept of leadership itself was very young and very fragile at that point. And so, of course, leaders became very powerful, and unfortunately, slavery began because many humans would tend not to submit to leadership, would tend not to submit to have any form of vision of their own. Okay, of course, tyranny developed from there for a multiplicity of reasons, actually, which we will not go through in this podcast. But of course, I know we will understand. You understand what I'm talking about. So, because leaders of human beings became very powerful due to the stability of human communities that made them more powerful than animals, progressive, because of their very nature. Human beings are intelligent, so their intelligence in community is multiplied, 1,000-fold. And leaders of such communities, of course, became very powerful. So political power, that is where the enticements of political power come from. History has shown that when people obtain political power, they tend to change. Okay, they tend to change. Now, this is so true. Okay, and in fact, there's a story, an African story. I think it was written by Chinua Achebe, or one of these other early Nigerian writers, about the tortoise. Okay, now the tortoise is known to be a very smart creature in Africa, and is a favorite of many folk tales. And what happened to the tortoise was that they were going to have a meeting. There was a problem in the community, and they were supposed to have a meeting in the sky. Okay, and in the process, of course, the tortoise, coincidentally, the tortoise was the only one among the pack that could not fly. Okay, he found himself in the midst of birds, and so the bird said, "Okay, we will lend you our wings so that we can fly to the sky, to the meeting place up in the sky, and have our meeting." Okay, and so it was agreed. The tortoise was given some wings, and he flew to the sky. And when he went to the sky, the tortoise coincidentally was the only one who could talk, could communicate in the language of the people of the sky. Okay, and so when the tortoise was asked what he needed, when he asked for it, he was given it. He consumed it alone. Okay, because he was so smart that he gave himself the name All of Us. Okay, his name became All of Us. And if they ask him, but they said, this food is for all of you, the tortoise said, "Oh no, it belongs to me," because he named himself All of Us. Okay, so they brought something, he would consume it. They brought something, he would consume it. They brought a food, he would consume it. If they offered any help, he would say, "Oh, this help is mine because it is for all of you." Okay, so that's how what happened. And the birds watched on as tortoise did this, and in dismay, of course. And as they were going to leave, it was time to go back home. So the bird said, "Well, you're very smart. We see what you have done. You have outsmarted all of us. But what is going to happen is that when we return, actually we need our wings back." Okay, tortoise begged and begged and said, "No, I can't fly down without the wings." He said, "No way. No, I mean, we have done our job. We came here. It's like you're the only one who has been satisfied. So we need our wings back." And so they collected their wings and they flew away and left tortoise. And the tortoise fell from the sky down to the ground. And that is the reason why the tortoise has, something that looks like a cracked shell. Those little parts of the shell. So that's an African story. And, that is a story actually from experience of what leadership is in African society. Okay, so this is the problem. And of course, the strength of community is also emphasized within the story. You would ask, if Africans knew about this a long time ago, why haven't they been using it? Because in Africa, we know that the problem of leadership is most present here in Africa. Africans have been using it, believe it or not. Remember your African history. When you study African history, you discover that when the colonial powers came, the reason they found it easy to conquer Africa was because Africa was the least political continent on the planet Earth. Okay, they preferred to live in small groups, okay, rather than form kingdoms. Okay, that is the reason Africans have known this for thousands of years. That's why they don't form groups, because they have very bad experiences with political power. Okay, so this is an African story, but there's another one which is a European story which I came across very recently. Of course, the story of Beowulf. We know the story of Beowulf, of the witch that makes sure that every king that rules in the land in was it Denmark, I think, must give her. She must have some kind of hold on him. So this is the whole story. These stories go to emphasize the enticement of political power. And I so resonate at the time I watched that film Beowulf. It was so what was happening, especially here in Nigeria at that time. And I was like, wow, this so clearly shows what's happening, and it's a global issue. Somebody comes to power. Of course, there's some kind of godfather that wants to, retain some kind of hold on power, while the person is there. And so these are the issues, okay? So it is known that political power has a lot of enticements. And when people get into power, they often change. But there are reasons for this. Some are legitimate, some are illegitimate. Okay? And what are some of them? We'll just go through them and we'll discuss them as we go through. One is the dynamics of needs, wants, and realities. We all come into, the idea of leadership with a lot of expectations. Oh, when somebody is in power, we complain. Why doesn't he do this? Why doesn't he do that? Why does he do this other thing? But of course, it is his duty or her duty when he gets the position of power to look at these things carefully and prioritize. What are the needs? What are just wants? And what can really be truly achieved? No matter what the needs and wants are. And of course, within this dilemma and dynamics, of course, there has to be prioritization. Sometimes, wants have to give way to needs. And of course, realities will also determine whether needs can be fulfilled the way we think they can be. So these are the pressures of political power. And often, when you are not on the seat, you will never really know how these things affect you. And this is just that. Okay? The second issue is leadership starts from the followership. Leadership starts from the followership. Okay? We can understand this that in more democratic settings, people often get leaders that they are. Okay? When you know a person, you know his lifestyle. The popular lifestyle or belief system that governs a society often is responsible for pushing a leader to the position he is. Okay, so leaders are created from the society itself. Okay, so the more popular thing with this society determines who becomes a leader, especially in democratic settings. Okay, but sometimes it is not always so. Sometimes good leaders get bad followers. Okay, and sometimes good followers get bad leaders. Okay, so sometimes good followers get bad leaders. So sometimes it happens like that. Okay, and some people have blamed some of these from the fact that some of these leaders are inexperienced. Okay, and when they go and they get a lot of resources, they become greedy. Even a person who was good turns bad because, of course, the human nature. Okay, and so it's possible for good followers to get a bad leader. Okay, and it's also possible that a people might, like we see in sometimes even in Nigeria here, that there is so much expectation for leadership that people sit down and do nothing, and they just push people to position of leadership, expecting leaders to do miracles. So this is just the problem. And so in that situation, they are actually bad followers that have created some kind of god image of a god, and in that position of leadership, and pushed an unfortunate human being there. Okay, and this is why we see certain leaders. We see in the situation that was described that happened in the Congo at the inception of the country when it gained its independence from the Portuguese. We see that a very, very peculiar situation there. While Lumumba was trying to emancipate the people through education, feeling that this matter of factly approach will change the country, his subordinate of course, Siseko was the wiser, okay? And he understood that these people, of course, it was clear from an analyst that, from an analyst point of view, that the Portuguese really did not emphasize education. And so, since the majority of people were not educated, it would be foolhardy to try to lead them, through the Western approach. And what Siseko did was to make himself a god, sort of, And the more they had a god to worship, the more they ignored him to do what he wanted to do. And so these are the issues, okay? So leadership starts from the followership, okay? Leadership, and you look at it here in Nigeria, Babangida succeeded because he employed a similar approach. He was untouchable, once the people see you as a godlike figure, of course they respect you and they fear you. Of course, Gowon himself succeeded, maybe for a little less different reasons, but for a similar approach, okay? He had the duty of course, managing the civil war, and when stability came, it was a little more difficult to manage, but these were the two long-lasting presidents of Nigeria, and he succeeded in such a situation because if they had allowed the democracy, they would have failed. Okay, so this is the issue. Sometimes you have bad followership, and the leader just has to, work with what he has. And this is the problem that we face now and then. So the next point is the pressure of stability, admiration, and expectations. Okay? Now, that is to follow up with the issue of resources. Okay? Sometimes the resources associated with a particular position are so much that the person is not used to that. And so the character now is revealed. Okay? The real character of the person is revealed, because he lacks the experience, or he or she lacks the experience. And so because those resources are there, the person is now revealed for who the person is. Okay, that pressure is so much. And of course, because people tend to worship him or her, so the person now believes them, that wow, this position I'm holding must be close to God, and so of course I must be important. And because I'm important, I must, demand people to respect me. I must demand that people give me my due. A kind of a sudden realization. Oh, I didn't know I was so important. Of course, there are many people that could have done that job, but because he's there, he seems to be the most important person, of course. So this is the issue. The pressure of stability. People love success. People love to see a successful person. And of course, they tend to give that person too much. And of course, it leads to self-worship, self-admiration, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that pressure alone creates that kind of situation. Okay? And one of the issues is the fear of leaving that position. The person cannot imagine himself outside that seat, or outside that office, or outside that position. Okay? Even if there are better things to expect, sometimes you will be shocked that people will prefer to stay in a more mediocre situation just because they cannot imagine a better thing outside that. So they create that kind of stagnation within the system, and it becomes a problem. Okay? So this is the problem that we see. Okay? People are unable to create anything new. And so they go around, it creates that same system we see, sometimes we see in Africa here. They create a lot of stagnation. Okay? They want people to believe that things are a particular way when they are not like that. Okay? So this is the problem. So the pressure of stability, the admiration and expectations of people creates that kind of system. Okay, so absolute power. The next one is absolute power corrupts. Okay, of course, very linked to what we have said already. Absolute power corrupts. When you have people who are, like, somebody might say, look, I'm the only one from my village that is educated, or I'm the only one who can is trained to handle certain technology. Okay, so that creates a situation of absolute power. Okay, and most of the tyrants that took over in Africa early during the colonial period, the post-colonial period, experienced this, because they were the only people in power. They were the only people with access to the powers that be, and so of course it corrupted them. Okay, so the other one is the law of diminishing returns. Okay, this is a law of economics. Of course, we may have encountered this law in economics. The law of diminishing returns affects leadership, and this happens. It can happen during one period of leadership. It can also happen through periods of decades or a generation. Okay, and we've been experiencing that even in the Western system. The Western system is experiencing the law of diminishing returns. Okay, people basked in democracy through the 60s, through the 70s, through the 80s, and the 80s were the peak of the whole thing. By the time we had reached the 90s, people were asking the question, do we really want to go the way these people are going? Because the West began to embrace certain things, and people began to ask themselves questions. Okay, do we really want to maybe this is not the best way to go? And that is the law of diminishing returns. They themselves began to ask themselves, and I get it. I'm really find it very interesting that a lot of times it is the Westerners that are asking themselves these questions, and of course doubting democracy itself, doubting their own culture, and it is what has created the problem we have now. So the whole system is affected by the law of diminishing returns. Okay, and this affects both leaders and followers. People can get used to a leader and they begin to, want something else. Okay, also followers get used to prosperity, and sometimes this creates such problems. They take it for granted until another bad leader comes, and then they say, oh, we want that other one. This is the issue. This is a cycle. Okay, the law of diminishing return. The last topic is a very important topic, and I believe that we should look at it very closely in the generation we are in now. Democracy is diminishing. Cultures that in the past upheld democracy are diminishing. Freedom and human rights, these cultures are diminishing because they are being affected by the law of diminishing returns. And it is not as easy as saying that it is just the effectiveness of that culture that is no longer really pungent. But in my view, I discovered that mostly it comes from the practitioners themselves, the followership. Okay, they tend to embrace the prosperity that has been brought about through democracy, through human rights, through Western education, and in basking in it, okay, they have forgotten that this is what has brought us this far. and have begun to question foundational concepts that have created this prosperity. And because of that, of course, they are not getting what they should get from it. And for the very fact that they refuse to really question from the beginning, really find out why the prosperity that has come. Okay, and so these are the issues that are actually involved in this. Okay, and when you look at all these things, and especially the sort of imminent crisis that lies in the horizon, especially in these times, you tend to ask, are we actually giving more than we can handle? This is a legitimate question. Okay, and so many leaders are asking this question. Okay, from the climate change activists to the social activists to those who are activists for minorities, those who are activists for racial inclusion and equality. We are all asking, are we giving more than we can handle? Is the civilization and prosperity we find ourselves in an accident? That is the question. Is it an accident? Or is it really from the principles that have been developed through human history? Are those principles really principles that we can continue to hang civilization upon, or build the foundation of civilization on? This is a question. Okay? And of course, for me, the answer lies in ideology. Very strange place to go to, but that's the basis. The answer lies in ideology. What ideology do you subscribe to? Okay? The ideology you subscribe to will determine your answer to this question. Some people may believe that human civilization is an accident. And because of that, of course, it doesn't matter where we go from here. But if you believe that human civilization is created and sustained via a specific set of principles, you will agree and you will be able to really determine why we have been given what we have been given and where we should go from here. I am David Njichinki for you today in Searching the Heart.
Discover a transformative journey into the kingdom of heaven. Following the initial publication, the author dives deeper with two insightful follow-up books. Ever felt disconnected from God even in worship? Explore how God's unconventional ways can transform your life. How can you align with divine plans, avoiding distractions? Find answers in The Kingdom of Heaven on Earth and The 3, Illuminating Christian Truths and Prophetic Practices. Unlock profound insights guiding you toward a deeper connection with God. Don't miss out. Dive into this enlightening exploration today. Click the link on the caption to get your copy.